Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Farah, and I'm a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. On behalf of Institute of Chinese Studies, I extend a warm welcome to all to today's ICS Wednesday seminar titled Parallel Paths, Divergent Agendas, India and China and the World Trade Organization. This seminar examines China's evolving role within the World Trade Organization and changing dynamics of India-China engagement in the multilateral trading system, tracing China's journey from its application to join the WTO in 1986 to its accession in 2001 to its subsequent emergence as a major player in global trade negotiations. The seminar explores how Beijing's negotiating positions have evolved over time, how they have increasingly diverged from those of India. It also assesses the broader implications of these developments for the future of WTO and the interests of developing countries in an increasingly fragmented global trading order. The speaker for today's seminar is Mr. D. Ravikant. He is a Geneva based journalist specializing in international trade and economic policy. He currently provides daily analysis on WTO and global trade developments for Washington Trade Daily and Sons. He has written for Washington Trade Daily, South North Development Monitors, published by the Third World Network in Penang, The Wire, The Federal, Economic and Political Weekly, and Asia Times. Earlier in his career, he worked with PTI, India Post, The Independent, The Economic Times, and Business Standard. His work offers a critical counter narrative to Western perspective on trade, and it seeks to hold powerful nations and institutions accountable while bringing the concerns of developing countries to the forefront of international trade discussions. Through his investigative analysis and commitment to transparency and fairness, he offers an important perspective on global economic governance and ensures that the voice and interest of the global south remains central in debates taking place in Geneva. The chair for today's seminar, Professor Vishwajit Dhar. He is a distinguished development economist and a former professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is also an honorary fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies. He played a pivotal role in establishing and leading the Center for WTO Studies. Professor Dhar has represented India in major multilateral negotiations, including those at WTO, UNFCCC, WIPO, and CBD, and has served on expert group for several international organizations. He has also been a consultant to UNCTAD, UNESCAP, UNDP, ILO, WHO, and the South Center. Professor Dhar has served on the board of directors of the Exim Bank of India and continues to advise several institutions working on trade and intellectual property rights. He is widely published in national and international journals. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask for all the participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Professor Dhar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alka has been asking to be unmuted. She just wanted to welcome Ravi. So can she be unmuted, and then we can start. Yeah?
Sorry, the thing had already started. I could have come in later, but really glad to welcome a long-time friend and batchmate, and now, of course, a very well-known writer on issues that concern us all. So glad to have you on board, Ravi, and basically, as ever, thanks your experience and your insights into this whole world trading system. I think will make for an excellent discussion today. So welcome you both, and thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Alka. And it's such a pleasure to see Ravi here. We go back several decades. I don't want to mention how many. And both, from our JNU days, and then also fellow travelers on the WTO pathway. So we have been interacting very closely for decades. It's a wonderful topic that he has selected, and something that is pretty close to our hearts. And we have been following this India-China sort of tango right since the time, I would say, India gave unconditional access to China, the WTO. And still remember the Seattle Ministerial Conference in 1999, when Murasali Maran announced in his press conference that India is not going to put any conditions for China's accession to the WTO. Because the actual accession happened 2 years later, but that was the expectation that India had from China's joining the WTO. That the forces of the global South will become stronger, and the developing countries, which were then resolutely working together to change the dynamics in the WTO. We really thought that we're going to be having a fellow traveler who is going to strengthen our hands. Well, things happen subsequently, and I'm sure Ravi is going to discuss all this. But subsequently, and we'll also discuss later, maybe I'll briefly give my perspective after Ravi makes his presentation. So without any further ado, let me invite Ravi. Again, a great pleasure to have you here. I'm really honored to I would say facilitate. I'm not going to chair. I'm not chairing. Of course, facilitator has a different connotation in the WTO. And Ravi has been bashing the facilitators who have been ruling the roost in the WTO, of course. But in any case, it's great to have you here, Ravi. And your flow now. Thanks.
Thank you, Bishwajit, for your generous comments. And as you have already said, our work goes back to several decades. I think it all started in 1990s, early 90s. Then, of course, we have been in communication on several issues. And it's well recognized that you're one of the leading analysts on global trade, India's engagement with the World Trade Organization, and you've also been closely monitoring each development. So it's great pleasure to present my views to you. And then I would like to thank my good old classmate, Alka Acharya. Alka has been an outstanding classmate. While I drifted into journalism, she proceeded with her academic studies in Chinese studies, and she's done, exceedingly well to become a distinguished professor in Chinese studies. So this discussion primarily emerged during a conversation with Alka, and suddenly she has suggested that this could be an issue to speak about, namely about the current developments in the World Trade Organization between China and India, and also trace the historical conjuncture starting from 1986 and to subsequent developments in the WTO during different negotiating meetings and where we stand today. So now let me go back to the subject. Before examining the historical juncture, I just would like to inform you about the current developments at the WTO. Namely, recently China has launched 2 trade disputes against India. Now, these 2 trade disputes are the first of its kind by China after it joined 2001 as the 143 member of the WTO. Now, these disputes, concern basically tariff measures and also restrictions on 2 issues. One is automotive and renewable energy sectors, and the second is the solar panels, solar cells. Now, both India and have been active participants in WTO. These two trade disputes came as a big surprise, but they have to be viewed against the backdrop of developments within the WTO negotiations and how India and China have diverged significantly from 2015. In some way, in one way or other, these disputes are unwarranted. But by raising these two disputes, China is signaling to the world that it is basically unhappy with India's domestic trade policies. Now, this is also coming in the backdrop of uh, tensions over some Chinese priorities at the WTO. So I'll run into all this. Although succeeded, China has succeeded in mobilizing large support for its controversial initiative called Investment Facilitation for Development, which is a plurilateral agreement. India has been consistently opposing this issue when it first came to WTO in 2015. Uh, China is fully aware that there cannot be a meaningful resolution of this two disputes at the WTO, given that the highest legal arm of the trade dispute resolution, namely the appellate body, has been paralyzed, and it has been paralyzed since 2019. And so, even if China wins at the panel stage, China wins the dispute at the panel stage, India can definitely void the implications by appealing it to a dysfunctional appellate body. Now, appellate body, as I told you, is the highest legal arm, which has been paralyzed by the United States. And interestingly, because of several Chinese trade disputes against United States, where Washington lost significantly and was refusing to implement the rulings of the appellate body. And so subsequently in December 2019, the United States paralyzed, basically made it dysfunctional. So that is the background. And then now I go back into the history. In 1986, when China applied to join the WTO, it coincided with what was called the launch of the Uruguay Round trade negotiations. So now the Uruguay Round was supposed to be the manifestation of the rising globalization or the hyper globalization based on neoliberal economic policies following the Washington Consensus, where countries are required to open up their markets, allow free capital movement, and remove all the regulations, deregulation of sort. So this period, 86, also coincided with the China's great modernization, where it has started opening the market in a significant way. And this was under the Deng Xiaoping's economic modernization program. In fact, it used during the accession talks, I used to interact with China's chief negotiator, Long Yong-tu, and he's a very interesting negotiator to share ideas and find out what was the current status, because it involved a marathon process. So once I told him, is this supposed to be a blueprint of whether the cat game, namely whether, it doesn't matter the color of the cat so long as it catches the mice. So, yeah, Mr. Longyang too said, I know where you're coming from, but we are engaged in our own great modernization of our economy, and we are willing to accept ideas from all sides. We are flexible, and that is his attitude, which is rarely seen among our own Indian negotiators. So China started negotiations of accession to the WTO in 1995. And as Vishwajit rightly pointed out, India is one of the countries that unconditionally accepted China's accession without making any demands on its opening for its own products. That was the great attitude of then Indian government, namely the Vajpayee government at that point of time. So the accession talks finally concluded in 2001, between 1995 and 2001, 6 years. And in these 6 years, China made sweeping concessions, both in market access and rules. And it has actually been pressurized by the United States to accept conditions that are WTO plus for developing countries. But China did all this willingly. And so if you go through the accession protocol, there are, in each area, China took really sweeping commitments, which is not the case for all the developing countries. That apart, China's accession was facilitated by the first Bush administration and the Clinton administration. Despite the Tiananmen Square events in 1979, both the American administrations, under different assumptions, wanted China's entry into the WTO. They generally expected that this would enable China to enter into the world market, world trading system, and then also help China to gradually be democratically politicized. But the second condition did not happen. So that was how China joined the WTO in 2001, and starting from 2001, China and India have been closer in terms of adopting common negotiating positions, and also opposing the WTO's advanced countries' demands in various areas. So I'll run through this whole negotiating history in few minutes. Namely, I start with 2001, and then that was the WTO's fourth ministerial conference. And then we moved to 2003, that is WTO's fifth ministerial conference. In the run-up to the WTO's fifth ministerial conference, China joined India, South Africa, Brazil in creating what was called the G20 group of developing countries on agricultural issues. This is a remarkable development in global trade negotiations, because this is the first time developing countries under the banner of G20 started adopting common positions on several issues of agriculture, namely how do you remove your domestic subsidies, what is the market access that you would provide, and what would you do with issues in removing export subsidies, export credits. So these are several issues, and China joining the G20 was a big development because this was a direct confrontation with what was then the US and European Union alliance to block their agenda for not doing enough in agriculture. I mean, they were primarily interested in adopting restrictive positions and not willing to give developing countries for whom the agriculture is one of the main areas of mainstay, and as well as market access and demands. So that was an important development. That was the fifth ministerial conference. So this cooperation between India and China continued between, say, the fifth to 10th ministerial conferences. So, for example, at the sixth ministerial conference in Hong Kong in December 2005, again, the unity in alliance and aligning positions continued, between China and India, along with all other developing countries. This continued again at the Bali ministerial meeting. I'm skipping 2-3 ministerial here, where China and India cooperated. For example, in 2000 for 4 July Framework Agreement, and similarly in in Geneva ministerial meeting, that was in 2008, where the talks broke down. So there again, there is China following the Indian positions. In fact, India is seen as a kind of a guardian for the developing countries and Southern Global South Alliance. Uh, that was the time also when Indian governments were adopting autonomous positions. I mean, to address the developing country concerns as well as India's domestic concerns. So they were in confrontation with the bigger members like US, European Union, and several others on these issues. So this China-India togetherness or cooperation continued from the 2008 to 2013. That was the 2013 was the first meeting in Bali. I mean, this was the WTO's 9th ministerial meeting. And there again, China and India adopted common positions. So the convergence in the areas of interest to both countries was largely in agriculture. And it was at the Bali meeting for the first time one saw the signs of divergence on one area called the trade facilitation. India had opposed the entry of trade facilitation, but because of the so-called public stock holding programs for food security, India agreed reluctantly the entry of what is called the trade facilitation agreement. Now, the divergences finally came into open at the WTO's 10th ministerial conference. That was in 2015 in Nairobi, Kenya. There the issue was basically the continuation of the Doha round of trade negotiations, which the big players were trying to kill it. At the crucial Green Room meeting, where there were 5 countries, India, China, Brazil, US, and the European Union, there was a tension about the continuation of the Doha round of trade negotiations without achieving or accomplishing any of its goals, the development oriented goals. Now, at that meeting, the Indian Trade Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, basically abstained from the meeting at the point of discussion on the continuation of the Doha negotiations. And it was China which fought fiercely on this continuation of the negotiations. In fact, China's chief trade negotiator, his name is Won Chuang. I could be wrong. Oh no, Chauvin, I think. Anyway, he was telling me after the meeting, asking rather, why was India not ready to support the continuation of Doha negotiations, despite its all developmental oriented goals? So he was very unhappy, and he basically said that the big boys managed to secure what they wanted, namely killing the Doha trade negotiations uh, because of India's absence. Now, all this is captured in an article I wrote for the Economic and Political Weekly. That was in 2016 March. It's a long article. So there I have indicated what happened at that meeting and how India dismantled the Doha round of trade negotiations. Now, from then on, China's positions have dramatically diverged from India. For example, in 2016 or 15 or 16, China brought what was the issue called the investment facilitation for development, which India had blocked on grounds that it violates the procedural and systemic issues and that it is inconsistent with the WTO's Marrakesh Agreement. So the debate continued, though China did not bring this issue to the WTO's 11th Ministerial meeting in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Issue later came up, and there was this group of what called joint statement groups. Now, these groups are primarily moving away from WTO and starting independent plurilateral negotiations on their own, regardless of the WTO rules. In a way, they were violating the WTO rules, but they decided to do this because the negotiations at the WTO have more or less paralyzed. Now, what happened there and subsequently was very interesting. China has now started aligning with the positions of the big developed countries on there are about 4 or 5 issues. There was this digital trade. There was disciplines for micro, small, and medium enterprises. And then there was the other issue of what is called the investment trade facilitation. Investment facilitation, trade facilitation for development. So gradually China moved away from not only from India, from other developing countries. Many developing countries were opposing to join these negotiations since they are not multilateral and also since they are not based on WTO rules. So the tension again started growing, with India being the only member to block this investment facilitation for development. From there, it's been a strategic shift and on the part of China, and this it represented a significant departure from China's earlier alignment with broad developing country coalitions and reflected its growing stake in preserving and shaping the existing global trade order, which is, of course, a neoliberal trade order. For nearly 2 decades, I mean, in the 2 decades, China was there. For the first 15 years or so, India and China traveled together, though sometimes with minor divergences here and there, but broadly aligning with each other's positions. Now, this was primarily so in agriculture, in development issues, and in Doha negotiations, and in South-South coalitions. So now, where do we come to now? Today, China and India are so divergent and opposed. Now, currently, the WTO, there are these negotiations going called the WTO reform negotiations. This is primarily an agenda of the developed countries who are now saying that the current rules of the WTO, as set out in what is called the Marrakesh Agreement. The Marrakesh Agreement established the WTO in 1995, and much of the Marrakesh Agreement rules are primarily created by the US, the European Union, Canada, and Japan, what was called the Quad, 4 countries which really ran through this Uruguay round negotiations, following which the countries arrived at the Marrakesh Agreement. Today, these big countries, along with China, are trying to dismantle the Marrakesh Agreement. For example, if you take issue by issue, there is one of the cardinal rules of the WTO is that the decisions are taken by consensus. This is set out in Article 9 of the Marrakesh Agreement. The big boys, as well as China, say that this decision making by consensus is a roadblock to arrive at any new outcomes or new issues. So constantly they are now seeking to change this principle of decision making by consensus. Unfortunately, China is a major party, though China has different constructs on how to change this decision making by consensus. Similarly, the developed countries want to do away with what is called special and differential treatment. Now, special and differential treatment enables developing countries by self-designation to take somewhat lesser commitments or flexible or relaxed commitments on implementing several WTO agreements, current and future agreements. China is a party to this issue of SNDT, though China has announced several months ago, I think more than a year ago, that it will not undertake any SNDT based commitments in the future negotiations, except what it had already has. But China said it will remain as a developing country, but willing to not take SNDT based commitments. So that's a big entry point for China to loosen or weaken the SNDT architecture that is so important for developing countries. Similarly, there are other issues in the reforms where China has joined them, not as a developing country, but a part of the developed countries. Though some of the issues are targeted against China. For example, there is an issue called the level playing field issues, which is again the American, Japanese, and the European demand that there has to be a level playing field between the commitments so that the developed countries remain on par with the developing countries. So here China, though, is supposed to be opposing, but allowed this issue to come in a big way. More than that, the way these reform negotiations are being conducted, China is not calling for the kind of transparency and openness which the developing countries are demanding and which India is demanding in a big way. China seems to be happy with whatever is going in the reform discussions, while developing countries are all opposing it in a big way. Now we come from the larger other issues. So where does China stand today? It's basically it's a neoliberalism and the rise of China. China has been one of the major beneficiaries of neoliberal globalization. And it has not only captured a large market access, and it has enabled the entry of China and become the second major trading power. But yet, these same neoliberal policies, which the Western countries have, demanded or asked the developing countries to implement from time to time, have started wrecking that same neoliberal order because the Western countries today see that the China's exports is basically deindustrializing and paralyzing their own economies, even though it was they who really started this neoliberal economic policies demanding China to do this and do that in every area. Today, the neoliberal order of globalization has been turned upside down, and in fact, it's been seemingly brought to an end. But so today they are saying that we cannot accept this neoliberal globalization to continue, but they are willing to do neoliberal policies in the domestically, but not in the external areas or sectors. So that is the contribution of China, which is a beneficiary of neoliberal economic policies. And today, fortunately or unfortunately, it has almost wrecked that process. So, on the other side, on the developmental aid and other aid areas, China has done quite a lot that bridge, the initiative China started for exporting capital to several developing countries. That has come up also with some conditions, though China does it on very concessional terms. But developing countries, particularly in Africa and other continents, have started raising complaints. Uh, Consequently, we do not know whether these Chinese aid policies will really benefit them or undermine their own autonomous economic development in these countries. Broadly, I mean, this is the outline. I'm just going to read some points which I made. One second. So I'll just run through these points, namely the starting point, rarely converging paths, shared status, India and two largest developing countries, the development. The key observation is their agendas and positions have converged at some points, diverged largely. And I explained about the China's accession in early years, then the early collaboration between China and India, negotiating objectives between the two countries for aligning on several areas. And China's negotiating objective has been to avoid new commitments, and then found in India a key partner, and this continued in G20 coalition and G33 coalition of developing countries. This was the period of active collaboration, namely between 2003 until roughly 2011. The Great Divergence begins in 2011. Systemic shift. WTO negotiations faced severe divergences. Ministers shunned the single undertaking. Namely, the single undertaking is what was agreed in the Doha Ministerial meeting, that all areas are linked. Even though you could arrive at preliminary agreements on one or two areas, but those agreements will be subject to agreement in all other areas at the end of the negotiations. That was basically derailed by the US and European Union, who, after grabbing or pocketing a multilateral trade agreement on trade facilitation. So that was the point. And then there was this PSH programs and all. There was common collision between China and India. But of late, again, China is not showing much interest. For example, 2 weeks ago, at the Committee of Agriculture meeting, I mean the WTO's Committee on Agriculture meeting, India was named and shamed by the United States and several farm exporting countries because that India is violating its subsidy commitments for rice and wheat. So this was a point where everybody expected or anticipated that China would intervene in support of India because it has the same concerns, but China remained silent. So India's turn, I mean, became highly defensive, and then philosophical divergences started, skepticism towards multilateral trade disciplines. Here I must mention New Delhi is now almost abandoning its multilateral positions in a way that would enable its bilateral free trade agreements, increasing emphasis on bilateral free trade agreements and putting all the eggs in those agreements while neglecting the multilateral trade agreements seems to be becoming the new reality of India's positions in global trade. For example, it does not fight for any multilateral development issues by bringing a coalition of developing countries or leading them. And increasingly today we have a lot of suspicion. Suspicion as expressed by the developing countries about India's real intent. And at the recent WTO ministerial meeting in Yaoundé, Cameroon, in fact, what India did was very damaging to its status in the global trade negotiations. India rightly blocked the Chinese initiative investment facilitation for development. But on the other side, India embraced the United States position on digital trade and giving a moratorium on not levying customs duties on electronic transmissions for a period of 4 years. Earlier meetings, India had opposed this issue, but now with the government in New Delhi increasingly becoming flexible or willing to adopt the US positions was demonstrated at the Yaoundé ministerial meeting, which is the 14th ministerial meeting. So the systemic issues, then there is pragmatism on part of China, while India maintains to stick to principled positions. To that extent, India is still opposed to many WTO reform discussions. The discussions on the topics on the discussion. China does not believe so much in free trade agreements because it wants a multilateral trading system to succeed or thrive, because that would enable its continued sway on the global trade. So I think I've gone through the points, and I would request if some of these issues are technical issues, but if you have any questions, I'm willing to get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ravi, for taking us through this long journey. In fact, it's a 40-year span that you tried to cover in the time that you had from 86 to 2026. And it's quite remarkable how China's position has actually changed. And I was actually I remembered, how Xi Jinping in his early years of his regime, he came out strongly supporting economic globalization. Something that you were saying, that it's China's support for new liberal policies, which is at the heart of its positions that he has taken in the WTO. And in Davos in 2017, I'm tempted to read out what Xi Jinping actually said. I said that it is true that economic globalization has created one second. Has created new problems, but this is no justification to write off economic globalization altogether. Rather, we should adapt and guide globalization, cushion its negative impact, and deliver its benefit to all countries and all nations. And then he said that when protectionist and nationalist forces are on the rise in the West, he warned against making globalization a scapegoat. So if you sort of see what he's saying in 2017, almost a decade back, then all the things that you said actually fall in place. And I would say that 2017 was the Buenos Aires Ministerial meeting was when the Doha Development Agenda, Doha negotiations were sort of officially buried. Because there was no consensus, like you mentioned. It's the heart of the WTO decision making. There was no consensus on moving the Doha negotiations forward, which virtually meant that Doha negotiations were dead. And this happened in 2017. And since then, our paths have actually, have deviated. India stuck to some of these principles of the of multilateralism, as you mentioned, but China just went away. Uh, this also reflected in some of the things that the BRICS together had said about multilateralism. I was actually following the BRICS, ministerial or the heads of states statements, and their support for multilateralism, support for the Doha process, actually disappeared after 2017. So it is also true that part of China's position, which is taken against India, and it started then, was also conditioned by the position that India was taking in the RCEP negotiation, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the mega regional trade agreement of Asia, where India's opposition to RCEP or joining RCEP, which it finally announced in 2019, was because of China's presence in this formation. This is very well known. Uh, so so even before the the breakdown in relations took place in 2020, the economic relations were already broken, and therefore we see this kind of divergence in positions between the two countries. Now, in China has very different ambitions. It almost sees itself, and as you can see from Xi Jinping's statement, as a leader of globalization. And this has been actually reinforced by what Trump is doing. So while Trump is withdrawing, is becoming isolationist, it's China which is holding up the flag of globalization. This whole neoliberal process. China is a flag bearer, the torch bearer of this process. So obviously, some of the things that you mentioned completely fall in place. If you look at the larger picture, and it's not at all surprising. With that, let me open the floor for questions and comments. If you have comments, please be short, because we try to take as many questions as we can, questions and comments. And the floor is now open.
So there is no question in the chat box posted yet. If anybody would like to ask a question directly, they may use the raise the hand option.
No one has any questions? Was Ravi so convincing that everybody's convinced? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Soumya Soni.
It might have been boring also.
No, not at all. Convinced everyone. So nobody's questioning what you said. So Soumya Soni, what is the question?
Yeah, there's a question posted in the chat box by Soumya Soni. She is a research intern at ICS, and she says, "Sir, as you mentioned, there is a deeper interpretation of India's decision to block China's investment facilitation in the recent WTO ministerial meeting. How does it reflect on border India-China strategic competition?"
Well, India's blocking this issue has not been sudden. It has been building since 2015 when the issue first was brought to the General Council. But India must show the same resistance in other areas also. For example, when it wanted the United States proposal on digital trade, which India had been opposing, suddenly has changed its stance at the recent Yaoundé ministerial meeting. So, I mean, the politics definitely come into play. There are geopolitical tensions as well as geo-economic rivalries. But today, India is in dire straits and it needs foreign direct investment in big way. But India is not showing the same equal treatment. In fact, the two trade disputes primarily allege that India is undermining what is called the national treatment under WTO rules, Article 3.4. Every member is supposed to play or offer access to foreign exports or imports uh, on the same condition as it does with its domestic industry. So, which India has not been doing. I mean, here politically, I think the current government has a lot of grounds against China. So, I don't know the real reasons, but certainly geopolitical and geoeconomic factors are playing an important role in this.
Thank you, Ravi. I think, on this whole issue of digital trade, let me also, inform you that India seems to have accepted this whole digital trade framework in its FTA with the European Union.
Yeah.
When European Union, the European Commission, released all the the summaries of the agreement. Of course, the final agreement is still to be revealed because it's going through the European Union, the internal processes. It's very clearly mentioned there that India has accepted the WTO, the plurilateral on digital trade, and it has agreed not to put any taxes on on e-commerce, which is what the moratorium issue was all about. So I think it's a uh, it's a twin kind of a strategy. It's also with the European Union that India agreed, and this got reflected in Yonde, as you were mentioning quite clearly. Yeah. Any other question, comment?
There's a question posted by Mr. Rappai Malaikal. He asks how all of this fit in the interest of Indian farmer and dairy sector.
This is a very divisive issue at this point of time, namely the United States and the farm exporting countries. They are called the Keynes group of countries. They are primarily pointing that India has been violating its subsidy commitments in agriculture in a big way, particularly in so-called rice, wheat, and other cereals, and also bringing so many other items like the pulses, cotton, and all into this PSH programs, public stockholding programs for food security. So there again, India is almost isolated. And today, the situation is very grim. Namely, the whole developing countries are somewhat divided and are not able to come together on their own bread and butter issues. which is unfortunate.
Yeah, Alka, please go ahead.
Okay.
Ah.
All right. Thank you. So, must say it was extremely thought-provoking, and I missed the first question that Paul had come, so I had to take that. But I don't know whether I'm repeating anything or not. But uh, I mean, it's more of a kind of a thinking question in the sense that uh, how do we look at the larger picture? From what you have argued, Ravi, it would appear. So, on the one hand, you have these two, the largest economies, set to dominate 21st century in whichever way. China clearly leagues ahead of us, but in any case, will be we will be the two large economies which will be shaping a lot of things. But you are saying that we are not on the same page now. Our paths are diverging insofar as what comes after kind of discourse is all about. So one is this, that asymmetry is increasing. We are not on the same page. We have now had a taste of what coercive measures can do if there is really not some kind of convergences on certain positions. So going ahead, what is the larger picture? I mean, do you think we can have China and India coming together to actually forge a meaningful uh, partnership to construct, or at least talk about constructing something new? I mean, is that at all a feasibility, or are we going to increasingly feel the heat, not just from the West, but now from China as well?
Uh, Thank you, Alka. I think it's a very valid question. Namely, what is the feasibility of the relationship between China and India? Uh, I genuinely think that it's not possible at this point of time because the agendas have diverged significantly and there is no common meeting point. One other development is that the Indian mission or its envoys have stopped communicating with China. For example, in 2017 and 18, there was an Indian trade envoy called Deepak, J.S. Deepak. He was so closely communicating and discussing, sharing positions with China. And in fact, that was the first time China and India put up a common proposal. But since 20, eight, 20, that was the COVID period, the Indian envoys, I mean, they have been sent by the Prime Minister's office or from the Prime Minister's office, have just stopped discussing with the Chinese negotiators. In fact, the Chinese negotiators keep asking me that what is the matter that India is not willing to discuss issues with us privately. So, how do you explain this sudden, refusal to engage and negotiate or share your positions or come to some convergence? So, our politics, domestic politics, has now started impacting our trade positions in a big way. The very first thing to do is that both countries can come together and start sharing their positions and all. But if one side is refusing to engage with China, then it is difficult. So the future doesn't look anything bright, and I don't see the prospect of any common positions or alliance or convergence coming into play in the coming days and years. And today, India has identified itself in a very important way with the US. I mean, see, for example, India's statement on 301 issues. Now, this is an issue on which China won a trade dispute against the US. But India's Commerce Minister is now rationalizing why it is important for the US to press ahead with this 301 actions on forced labor. This is unfortunate. In fact, India had opposed these 301 actions. So the least it could have done is to discuss this issue with all other trading partners in the developing world, in the global south. Instead of saying that we are okay with the 301 actions, and it doesn't show India in good light. I mean, China is still willing to talk to us, but our political, ideological opposition in some way or other is showing up. I hope I've answered your question, Alka.
No, indeed. Maybe we can have Biswajit also coming in later when he's summing up on this. But yeah, I mean, that's my sense, as it were, that we are not really talking to each other at all,
Yeah.
mostly past each other. So thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
There are no questions posted, sir.
No questions. No hands either. Okay. Let me now try and I won't sum up. Just a few words on what Ravi said at the end, and and Kalka's question and Ravi's response. I think that the two countries, at least on economic issues, are really on divergent path, and it doesn't seem likely that there is going to be any coming closer. Forget about the convergence, even coming closer. Although recently, government of India, sort of extended kind of an olive branch, in respect of foreign direct investment coming from China. Especially this is about investors coming from countries with which India has common land borders. So there was a restriction imposed in 2020, and a couple of months back, this has been partially, I wouldn't say removed, but it's been loosened a couple of months back. So there are clearly signs, part of Indian government, because of the problems we are having on foreign direct investment, and our net investment inflows are really dipped. There's a major problem, and which is also reflected in Prime Minister's call to the nation to reduce expenditure in foreign exchange. So foreign currency. So the government sees that there is a crisis coming, and so this olive branch was extended. So we have to sort of wait and watch how this progresses. Of course, we all know that the relationship, India-China relationships have slightly warmed up. Things are not as bad as they were a few years back, but these are so micro steps, real micro steps, that they're almost not really visible. I think that it is very important, and my own personal view is very important, that India and China work together in the WTO, because there is even if China has officially announced that it is not part of the developing countries anymore, it won't be exercising the special and differential treatment, or it try to take advantage of it in future. But still, there are whole lot of areas where our position, or the position of the South, or the aspirations of the South have to be met through a common a front you know that only China and India can lead. So if we can, sort of give leadership to the other countries of the South, and then at least ensure that the rules-based framework, the WTO, is put back in place. And that is a big thing that we need to do. Also, I was actually discussing a few days back that for a long time, India and some of the fellow travelers, including in China, this was in the 2000s, when we were utterly frustrated with the kind of blocking tactics of the developed countries. There were some informal discussions as to whether the developing countries themselves can formulate certain rules so that they can trade seamlessly and have some transparent set of rules. I think we need to discuss that possibility now, because our South-South trade is significant and growing quite rapidly. And if we can actually sit together and formulate certain transparent set of rules, then I think this is going to be for the betterment of all the countries of the South. And as I said, that can only be possible if India and China not just talk to each other, but actively engage, and that is very important for us. And I think the academic community, and I consider. Ravi may be a journalist, but he's an academic. All right. I think we have a responsibility to start discussing these possibilities, so that our governments, the policymakers, start understanding the importance of doing walking together, India and China. So this is a task that I think all of us have to take up and see how in the making of the new world order that has to emerge post Trump. India and China really try and put an equitable and an inclusive world order, which is something that countries of the South have desired since the years of decolonization in the 50s. So with that, I again thank Ravi. But before that, Alka had raised her hand. So Alka, please, you have the floor, please.
All right, very quickly, I just thought just react to what you said in one sense and say that what we are hearing from you are obviously pious homilies, and I don't mean it in a negative sense. We ought to be doing this. This is good in the larger kind of context. This will be good for the developing world. We can be the. These are not issues that are going to move the policymakers. I am thinking of getting out from both of you. What can be the real solid political kind of pressure here, which can actually nudge them together? Vajpayee had asked a question about how farmers and that huge constituency in both India and China stand to gain. Do you think that is a sufficient inducement? What is really going to be the game changing, which academics can present to the policymakers as something that is, well, yeah, that's the thing we are looking for. Let's move in.
No, you see, these are not homilies. Actually, I was just saying that there are possibilities which we have. It is on us to work them out. like I'll mention here in 2017, and period until when when Ravi was mentioning that we were at least talking to each other, and Deepak was instrumental in doing some of these things, our ambassador in the WTO. India and China actually presented a joint paper on agricultural subsidies, because agricultural subsidies in our two countries have been attacked by the West, by the US, and we came together and said, we defended the subsidies, saying that it is for the small farmers, and that is a position that we took. But there are many other areas where I think, this is what I said, that there are many other areas where there is possibility of the two countries working together, not just for our own benefits, because an agriculture is just India and China, and agricultural subsidies that we need to defend in the WTO. There are not many countries who actually give the kind of subsidies that we give. But on the larger, trade policy framework, uh, uh, there is a need, there's a crying need for us, for developing countries, to produce a framework. That is something that we have been aspiring for, like as mentioning, for the past 70 years. Um, now Donald Trump's policies, and of course European Union is also sailing along with Donald Trump to a large extent, gives us gives us enough and more incentive to come and work together. And the governments are not going to be starting to get to talk to each other all by themselves, and that's why I said that it is up to us to prepare those blueprints, the possibilities, where the possibilities that exist, and these possibilities then can hopefully be picked up by policymakers someday, and they can take it forward.
Yeah, if I may, uh, first and foremost, thanks to Beshir for illuminating on several issues that I have raised, and to Alka, who has been the prime sort of person in terms of organizing this discussion. And I also want to thank Atman Deshpande of the ICS and Farah and others. Uh, I think the bigger point of starting the dialogue is what we do in the BRICS. If we can at least start discussing some of these issues instead of opposition initiatives like the currency payments and all, which Donald Trump had been blocking and threatening countries with severe action. So BRICS would be a right venue to begin some kind of a serious dialogue instead of get opposing each other. And similarly at the WTO as well. It's important that at least where there are divergences, set aside them on one side, and where there are common points in agriculture, particularly where China has serious agricultural problems. But don't be surprised that tomorrow China is also going to become a major agricultural exporter and change the entire global farming system. I mean, this is not my insight. This is by Adam Toombs, who has written an article recently that how China is going to now become the major player in agriculture. So, there has to be a dialogue, there has to be a discussion among developing countries about the emerging scenarios in global trade. Well, thank you all. It's a great pleasure. I mean, thanks to Alka again and others. I enjoyed discussing some of these issues. Sorry, uh, if I'm incoherent at points in time. or if there is a discontinuity in my thought process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. Finally, I would like to thank all Alka to begin with for taking this initiative of inviting Ravi. It's really very useful to hear from him. First-hand report of what is going on in the WTO, Geneva, and all my friends in ICS for putting this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I seek your permission to formally bring an end to today's session.
Thank you.
With this, we come to an end to today's seminar. We thank Mr. D. Ravikant and Professor Biswajit Dhar for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their precious time. We also thank the audience for joining us today. The video of today's seminar shall be available on ICS YouTube channel. I would like to invite you to the upcoming Wednesday seminar. Further information regarding the events can be found on ICS website. And you may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, sir.